We are back and ready to kick off our first match of the day here in Group A of the playoff weekend for the European Hearthstone Grandmasters. And we've got Seiko versus Bunnyhoppor coming up, and a matchup I'm pretty excited for, honestly, because as I mentioned in the at the start of the day, Seiko, a player who definitely has been doing his own thing with his lineups. He was bringing Priest a little bit earlier than most, and then he was messing with the builds a little bit too. But even his builds of other popular archetypes, not this week, but there were weeks where he was bringing the more like control style warrior as well, the more control variant of Pain Warrior, as well as a few other interesting choices. But we see the more standard Galakron Priest here, and then we see the Quest Warlock as well, and then coupled with that Demon Hunter Warrior pair, which seems to be the case for almost every player. But this is a lineup that I like. I just don't know if it's going to be good enough. What do you think, Sant?
I mean, I do like the theory behind it. Right. Generally, again, this is as we see from Seiko's ban there, I don't know if you guys caught it or not, but this is a leave warrior up kind of lineup, which might look weird because Quest Warlock isn't exactly great against warrior, even if they aren't running bombs. You know, just Eggs and Terran and Warmaul Challenger can give you enough of a problem as Quest Warlock to be getting on with, and then obviously Demon Hunter versus Warrior is one of the worst matchups for Demon Hunter. But again, it's about, you know, that weakest deck positioning and what you end up having to ban. And I think most people who brought this kind of lineup that Seiko brought have banned the Demon Hunter, which you can now see on Bunnyhoppor's lineup is the deck that he's missing. So I'm okay with the theory behind it. I've come around to it slightly more week by week by week. But if you're going to ask me if I would be bringing a ban Demon Hunter or a ban Warrior lineup to this tournament, I would be bringing a ban Warrior lineup just every day.
Yeah, I think I'd join you in that one as well, which is, I guess, why I was saying, like, I like the deck Seiko has chosen as Hearthstone decks. Like, I like Quest Warlock a lot. It's super fun. But is it going to get the job done? We'll have to see, because not only is Seiko's lineup a little bit more different, a little bit more awkward with that leaving open warrior, he's going against Bunnyhoppor's what's left, which is the Pain Warrior, fantastic deck, of course, but then the Questing Adventurer Rogue and the Highlander Hunter. I just feel like, just looking at it right at this second, I would much rather be playing Bunnyhoppor's lineup in this match than I would Seiko's, because his decks just line up so well versus Seiko's. I think it's going to be a real uphill climb for him here.
I completely agree. I think the Warrior is positioned very well against Demon Hunter and fine to good, depending on your opinion, against Quest Warlock. I think the Highlander Hunter is positioned very well against Priest and fine to good against Quest Warlock, depending on your opinion. You might be noticing a theme here. There's a lot of disagreement on Quest Warlock matchups. But then, you know, outside of that, he's just in a good spot overall in the series. You know, he has multiple good cues for each of his decks, and you see straight away as we get into the series, he gets one of them, the Highlander Hunter going up against the Priest.
And just a final note, I do think, talking about the Druid a little bit earlier, you know, its matchups versus Rogue, I do think the newer iterations with the Questing Adventurer help that matchup a lot. Actually, because the Druid often can't kill the Questing and then they lose. But we could talk about that a little bit later on. Let's get into this game. Game number 1 between Bunnyhoppor and Seiko. Hunter on the top against this Priest. And this was, especially, I would say, Priest's peak, the maybe 1, 2 out of maybe just a couple like bad matchups you would say that Priest actually had, because Hunter put on so much just relentless damage so quickly that Priest could neither heal nor really grab the board fast enough.
Yeah, combine that with a big old pile of minions with 4 or 5 health or untargetable so that they can't be shot down by penance. You know, evasive Feywing can't be Shadow of Death or Time Ripped on curve. You just start to get repetitive minion damage through. And that's the problem that Priest has. They really want to remove everything that you play or contest everything that you play immediately with their own minion. As soon as Priest starts taking repetitive minion damage from minions with 4 and 5 attack, they're struggling.
Seiko does manage to pick up the Aesthetic Veilweaver, but that Thought Steal, the general turn 2 play actually from Priest, honestly. Even though it's not a minion, it looks pretty slow. It's very similar to, I would say, Corsair Cash, where it's a very solid 2-drop, even though it's a spell, because it gets you to what you want to do, which is just more stuff.
Makes me sick, Raven. We live in a world where you keep Thought Steal in your opening hand. Like, what has happened to the game?
It got weird, Solo. It got weird. And speaking of weird, we might well see a Griffin played out now. Bunnyhoppor is playing the Faceless Corruptor, so he will get a rush draw for Finn. But most importantly, if he plays out Zigsaw and it gets Shadow Madness, of which Seiko is only running one, but still, then he has a chance of the Zigsaw can just potentially be stolen going forward. Not quite yet, but just in general.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Like, you don't necessarily expose it to the Shadow Madness right now, but Seiko can quite happily just pass this turn, not develop minions, and then look to Shadow Madness it the next turn into your 5/4, and then potentially clear up board state. I believe that would be the turn where you have like Shadow Madness coin penance available, which would be horrible against the board state that you're leaving behind. And
that's the problem, isn't it? Although you couldn't trade it away this turn, he can trade it away, right? It's not. There's no like tricky way for Bunnyhoppor to kill his own Zigsaw at the moment. It's not doable, so it's a huge threat in itself. And you don't want to give Priest that just extra little power boost.
And also, Bunnyhoppor will know. He's played enough Hearthstone to know that if Seiko here has Thought Stolen, a Scavenger's Ingenuity, they always get the Zigsaw to go with that. It always happens 100% of the time.
Interesting now, though, the Bone Wraith and the Feywing are actually pretty solid minions for Seiko to play with here. This Griffin can get just kind of stopped with this Bone Wraith right now.
Right. Feywing looked a little less solid, I will say, but yeah, Bone Wraith contesting this board pretty nicely. Bunnyhoppor not with much of a follow-up here. You would really like to have the Feywing of his own in this scenario. Still has the same problem with the Zigsaw, where it's very vulnerable to Shadow Madness on this board. Doesn't have a nice way to set up for like a super juicily Faceless Corruptor on the next turn.
Is it too loopy to suggest trade with the Griffin and then freeze the Bone Wraith so it can't be Apotheosis and attack? And then you can deal with it with Faceless potentially next turn.
I think it's the only play he's got, yeah.
I guess my point is, like, does he trade? Okay, so he's going to hold with the Griffin. I was wondering whether he wanted to just trade it in to just lower the health, but I guess you're not really expecting that to go anywhere outside of a Penance.
Yeah, I think the hold is smart because Bunny, unless he gets exactly Shadow Word Death, can use the 5/4 to punch through the first half cleanly here if he wants to. And then even transform the 2 health minion, even though it would have higher attack at that point. Basically, doing it this way gives him multiple options to react to whatever the removal turn is from Seiko here.
This is fantastic, though. The Seiko having not only the death, but also the penance to clear up most of this board, puts Bunnyhoppor in the awkward point yet again. He can't get value from this Griffin before he transforms it with the Faceless Corruptor.
Yep.
But I do think he just
even
has
in
to
this
buy the
world, the trade last turn wouldn't have changed anything, right? It would just be a 2-1 on the board. He'd be in the same spot, no minions in play. He's basically in the same spot, having not made the trade on the previous turn. So he can just still make the same trade now if he wants to.
Yep. And just a note, we did mention Seiko was running a more anti-aggro list a couple of weeks ago, but he is not running the one of Pyromancer that was played around with a little bit of the early builds of Priest, and Seiko was playing at one point, but yeah, there's not that Pyro, so the 1 damage sort of side clear isn't there.
Side clear?
Does that make sense? I don't really know.
Soul Mirror, that's my main clear. Pyro's just my side clear.
Collateral clear. Is that better?
Yeah. Sure.
You know what I mean! Interestingly enough, that I did actually consider that Bunnyhoppor would just have to bite the bullet and Faceless Corrupt to the Griffin and just double trade into the Bone Wraith.
Yeah.
Only because this is slowing him down a lot.
It is. I said the lack of trade didn't make a difference. I should have said it didn't make a difference in the positive. It actually did still give Bunny more options on the following turn because he could still just make that play, right? Yep. Not attack and then Faceless Corrupt to the minion he still had alive. Was an option for sure, but I think Bunnyhoppor was happy just putting Seiko back in the same position again. And
really
honestly,
good
I think
pickup.
I think he's been rewarded for it with the way the plays have panned out from Seiko. Interested that this wasn't a time rip turn. from Seiko either. He played a 4-5 into a 5-5 instead of just time ripping away the 5-5. Clearly concerned about some of the bigger threats that will come down in the following turns.
Yeah, also does have Breath of the Infinite, and because he's not under much pressure, I think it's more of a so what, right? Like, okay, you do this, it puts your dragon to 1, you've still not hit me in the face, and then I'll Breath of the Infinite away next turn. Great. You know, I think it's a lot more of a I'll invoke Galacrond whilst getting some minion on the board here just to make him go for the trade.
Sure. The only thing I fear in scenarios like this is with this particular hand from Seiko, because he's missing Galacrond and Murazond, as Murazond now comes into the hand, you do have value problems with Priest when you don't hit those 2 specific cards to be able to create, you know, long-term value from Galacrond and just immediate power spikes with Murazond. So if you start doing things like just, you know, throwing away a 4-5 into a 5-5, you can actually just get outvalued even by aggro decks in some matchups. You know, we've seen multiple occasions where Demon Hunter has just outvalued Priest because they didn't draw Galacrond.
Does have Sethic, Veilweaver, and an Apotheosis though to get that rolling a little bit later on, which does help. And even this Evil
Conscriptor.
I thought it was. I just wasn't quite sure. Even that guy is going to get some level of value done, but he's just going to drop the Sethic.
Slight deterrent for Dino Tamer Brown, I imagine, is the motivation behind this play. If he plays Evil Conscriptor here, then Bunny just plays Brown and smacks him in the face. Now there's a Sethic Veilweaver in play that's scary.
I really like just the go face hero power and make the Faceless Corruptor kill the Sethic here. It creates a good board. It's pretty threatening, just 2 4-attack minions sat there. You clear up the Sethic, you weave the hero power in. You don't just leave Bran kind of hanging with a Sethic on board, which is, I think, a nightmare play. I think that's never going to happen.
Is the hero power worth over developing a 1-3 and getting the tracking in there as well? I guess you could save tracking until you actually manage to get your Zixor dead in this matchup. To try and have more options for power spikes off the tracking.
Yeah, and I always worry about just playing little minions out against Priest just to play them, or just because you can. So I think I naturally veer away from that and try and just make the most awkward board possible. But maybe that'd be worthwhile, but weaving in hero powers to catch up some damage he's missed out on, because this has been a very slow game from Bunnyhoppor. I think does start to add up into the late game. Go for something a little bit different though. Very susceptible to a Shadow Madness.
It is. Yeah, there was one turn, right, where Bunny could have just shipped it into that Shield of Galacrond that Seiko played to kill it immediately. But I don't think it really just fit the curve that turn. And I think, you know, one of Shadow Madness in the deck, I think Bunnyhoppor should be focused more on just making powerful plays than, you know, playing around the Shadow Madness blowout when there's only a single copy on the other side. But yeah, the Faceless Corruptor play you were talking about did seem fine to me.
If you think about it, it's kind of like having King Crush on the board.
Mm-hmm.
If you really think about it.
I think you mean if you don't think about it.
Well, sometimes you've got to think about it so much, you have to stop, and then it unlocks, right?
Right.
Just don't think about it.
I must consider.
It is good getting that Zixor or the Prime active, though, because it is one of those like weird counterplays to Murazond, where it's a strong play for you, but not really a good Murazond, because it obviously doesn't make the duplicates. It just makes 1 4-4 with Rush.
Yeah.
Okay, well now the Dino's going to go, right?
It is looking pretty Dino go raw, yeah.
I also wonder, just looking at this tracking, maybe because the game has gone slowly, Bunnyhoppor doesn't want to lose 2 of his cards. Right now, like there's a chance that he gets a bad tracking. There's still some very powerful tools in his deck. There's the Stormhammer, Zephyrus, Alexstrasza, Siamat. Maybe he just doesn't feel like going... He's got tools, right? He's never had, oh, I've got nothing to play this turn. He has the hand. He has tools available to him. Maybe he doesn't want to lose cards right now.
Gonna be honest, Raven, I hate that argument.
Okay. Wouldn't be the first, won't be the last. That's a good tracking, though.
It is a pretty good tracking, yeah.
I love the
And this
Animal
is the
Companion,
problem, right?
even though
Like,
it's probably Fey-Wing.
you named what, like 3 or 4 cards, so there's kind of 1 or 2 scenarios. Every other scenario, you get either to pick one of those extremely powerful cards, or you do this, and you get 3 cards closer to all of those extremely powerful cards in your deck.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, this isn't... that wasn't a suggestion just as a general rule of tracking by any means.
I know.
It's like, wait, Raven waits till he's only got a few cards left to play tracking? There has to be something wrong with this.
So I was going to say my only problem with Dynatoma Brand this turn is that it's a pretty juicy Soul Mirror. The fact that you also get a 2/1 Reborn Bone Wraith out of the deal. But, you know, much like my argument for Shadow Madness, I would create the same argument for Soul Mirror here, is that, you know, Bunny should generally focus, and I think generally when you're playing Highlander Hunter, you should just focus on making your turns as powerful as you possibly can.
Yeah. Because honestly, a lot of the time you don't have to worry about Murazond with this deck, because a lot of the cards don't end up being played like symmetrically, because they're Battlecry reliant, which is a very good thing to have versus Priest. Funnily enough, I was just about to mention the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, not the most common pickup for Priest, because they don't really draw through their deck that quickly. So I think at this point you have to be quite fortunate for it to be close to being active.
He has 2 dupes left in his deck, I believe. Fate Weaver
that's not so bad.
and Cycle of Galakrond. Yeah.
Oh, that's not so bad at all then, okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be Soul Mirror. Okay, this could be oh, interesting. Well, if this could be a good Faceless, right? He could trade the Bone Wraith in, and then just Faceless that. And still push out either some damage, get that Primordial down, but most importantly, just clean up this side of the board and try and set up once again. Because I do agree with you. I think Hunter here, priority 1 is just make boards that your opponent fears every single turn. Bunnyhoppor is playing, I'll just do my usual check I missed earlier, but he is playing the Nag Grand Slam in his list, which means there's certain levels of even extra burst damage.
I thought we'd got away with one!
No. Only the good players bring Nag Grand Slam, so... the most important card in the list, you could argue.
Bunny trades a little bit inefficiently in terms of face damage, just to protect the extra health on one of his minions here, to play around some key removals, of course, from Seiko's side. I will say that, yes, exactly, Faceless Corruptor is one of the premium Murazond targets in this match, believe it or not, because even though you'd only get 1, it's still pretty effective against Hunter minions to be able to just get a straight-up 4/4 rush.
Yeah, it's still something active on board, right?
Yep.
Here, though, starting to piece together some damage. But I think Bunnyhoppor soon should really consider just putting his foot down. He could go Tiamat, Divine Shield, Rush into the Fey-Wing. He could also use this and rush into Murazond with the Dwarven Sharpshooter Hero Power as well to finish it off. But I actually think just rush into the Fey-Wing, face with everything else, drop a Hero Power, and then set up the following turn with that Corrosive Breath to try and push extra damage.
I think you have to kill the Murazond. I think doing your play but using either Corrosive Breath or Dwarven Sharpshooter to finish off the Murazond is significantly stronger. Because there's 2 Apotheosis in Seiko's deck, and if you don't kill the 8/8 and your plan is go face, you're feeling very concedey to Apotheosis, whereas if you leave Evasive Fey-Wing up, well, guess what? It's Evasive Fey-Wing, right? So it can't be targeted with Apotheosis, because that effect is symmetrical.
And this is the other way. Instead of keeping the Tiamat, you can just do this and deal with both, which is actually very nice. Most importantly, get those Faceless Corruptors to hit face. That is priority, I think, number 1 here for Bunnyhoppor. As long as he does that and, you know, retains some level of board, then it's a good turn as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like this more than just leaving up the 5/4. Obviously, you're down a 6/6, your opponent's down a 5/4. The damage pushed is the same, but you're giving your opponent the option to remove 4 damage for free from your board next turn. But that does mean that you again retain a 6/6 in play. But when you combine a removal spell or 2 with that, I guess the way Bunnyhoppor did it works out better on average. I think it's pretty close though.
Was that Zephyrus? It was. So he can attack to 11, corrosive breath to 8, hero power.
No, don't hero power.
No,
you just Zephyrus Avenging Wrath. You just Zephyrus Avenging Wrath.
Yeah, you're right. I honestly always forget about Avenging Wrath.
Does this still work? Zephyrus Fireball? Yeah, sure.
Oh, right, yeah. That's what I was initially
Fireball.
adding up for.
Bunny literally missed this exact lethal last week, I believe, or the week before. Corrosive Breath your own minion into Zephyrus. And I saw Avenging Wrath immediately, so I was just about not again, Bunny. Do not miss this again. But no, he's fine. He finds
That's why I paused. I was
doing.
like, I'm pretty sure there's mana for Fireball here, but then you were like, Avenging Wrath. I was like, well, you're right. I can't argue with that. But congratulations to Bunnyhoppor as he takes game number 1. The important thing there was he got lethal some way. But honestly, it's so weird that I just always forget about Avenging Wrath. And I think it's because it almost all the time requires specifically an empty board state, right? Which isn't that common, at least in my play anyway. But congratulations to Bunnyhoppor there, getting a win. It did look a little bit dicey as Seiko did look very, very secure into that late game, but Hunter still has that relentless damage. So very, very strong. We are going to go to a quick break while we set up our game number 2 between Bunnyhoppor and Seiko. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Tour is officially upon us. Pull up a seat by the fire and join us as the action unfolds.
The Holy Wrath Paladin makes it all the way to the grand finals. You can see the relief on his face.
Oh, big stats.
Belcade has it. He's got the bird. He's got the trophy. He is the Masters Tour's whole champion.
We are back and ready to continue our series with Bunnyhoppor versus Seiko. Bunnyhoppor just taking a win with his Highlander Hunter against Seiko's Galakron Priest. Plenty more of the match to play out, but honestly, Sottle, I'm fearing for Seiko here because Bunnyhopper's lineup just gets stronger and stronger as far as I'm concerned. He's got a win with that Hunter done. Now he has the Questing Adventurer Rogue and the Pain Warrior. So if we move up those decks, I think even if we look at Rogue next and then Warrior, it's looking pretty good for Bunnyhoppor.
Yeah, I mean, I said it right going into the beginning of the series. If you look at Bunnyhoppor's decks against Seiko's decks, he probably averages somewhere in the region of 2 to 2.5 good matchups for each of his decks that he has up right now. So he's likely to be queuing good matchups, and that's exactly what we saw in game number 1 as we saw Highlander Hunter taking down the Priest. And I think there's definitely a lesson to be learned from watching that matchup play out. You know, the more and more we see it, you can win by just going fast and getting Fairy Dragon into Evasive Feywing, and then your minions never die and you just beat them up.
Victory.
But at the same time, like, if you just kill all of their minions and just push a little bit of damage every turn with Hunter, like, you just get there. You just draw a chunky boy off the top every single turn, you play it, you hero power, you kill their stuff to deny Apotheosis. Eventually you get over the line, be it with, you know, Zixor Prime, Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, Zephyrus, whichever power card it is that you need, you're going to get there eventually if you're just patient enough. I think that was a very nicely executed example of that strategy from Bunnyhoppor. Yeah,
and I think it just goes to continue to display that although it may look like it, Priest doesn't actually have that much healing outside of a landing Apotheosis on a large attack minion, right? Even if you land it on a regular size minion, it's not that much if you just kill it off after a turn or so. So you can just get it done even if it takes a little bit while longer. But we are going into game number 2. Seiko going to have Priest once again. But Bunnyhoppor going for this Rogue of the Questing Adventure variety.
That is a curve on Seiko's side. Disciple of Galakron on the board. Hits Mind Flayer Kaj off the rip. What?
Seems good to me, Sol.
Insanity. Mind Flayer Kaj might be the best 3-drop in the game. It's so good.
Stormhammer.
So many.
Stormhammer. I mean, the correct counter argument there was Edwin Van Cleef. We're literally playing against Rogue.
Huffer, still.
Huffer, okay, yeah.
It's strange though, because I talked a lot about Quest Adventure being very, very powerful, but I think actually versus Priest, it might be the weaker option, right? Because Priest does have direct removal, it does have Shadow Word Death, it does have the time rips to just straight up deal with it, and also it's still susceptible to Soul Mirror as well, as its stats are normally symmetrical.
Here we see the Bunnyhoppor in his natural habitat, roping turn 2.
It was hurting me the amount of time he spent in his last game on turn 2, whether he was going to play the Felmore or not. And it's like, of course you're playing it. What's going on?
He's great.
The future is clear. Your demise be near.
Oof.
It's a lot of information, even if the cards themselves aren't huge power plays. This is one of the sort of, you know, low-key powerful things about Madame Lazul is that Seiko knows right now that as long as that secret's up, his Mind Flayer card doesn't really get any value because there's a Blackjack Stunner in the hand, so he can now adjust his play accordingly.
And honestly, even just having coin seems pretty reasonable to me.
Is it coin? I feel like it might be Pharaoh Cat.
With this hand, do you think he needs a Pharaoh Cat over a coin? Huh.
Yeah.
Job done.
Just want more stuff.
Yeah, I think he just wants minions to play, exactly. You gotta love a good Thought Steal against Rogue, though. Pretty often you do hit those additional invokes, which are extremely powerful for you as Priest. Seiko here hit 2 of them, including picking up some extra removal with the Seal Fate.
Bunnyhoppor does have access to a pretty powerful plan with Togwaggle and Galakron in hand now. So what he's really got to do is work out how he gets there in the most efficient and safe manner. Because because the nature of if it is the wand, we can talk about wand versus priest in a little bit if you want. But if it is wand, or even if it isn't, just what Togwaggle can do and what Galakrond does for Rogue, it's all very. It's very powerful, but in a compact nature, right? Because the cards cost nothing, you can always like do the big burst turns, and that's what Rogue can sometimes struggle to deal with. So as long as Bunnyhoppor can get there, he's probably looking pretty confident about this.
Seiko just thinking about dropping the Kaj here anyway. I think he saw just the exact thought process there, right? Is he went to snap the Kaj and then went, oh yeah, Blackjack stunner. I don't care. I'm doing it anyway.
I think it'd be okay. It's only one extra mana, and Kaj can be pretty good later as well. But most of the point is maybe just getting the Blackjack stunner out this early means that there's more chance of Seiko sticking a bigger minion, for example, this Shield of Galakrond he has in hand.
Yeah, good point. I think you still do have to blackjack it, right? You're going to lose so much board control to this minion if you don't.
Ooh,
Okay, that makes life exciting.
that's like a slap in the face for a priest, isn't it? It's like, oh, look at this 2/1 poisonous that you... Oh, wait, no, you can't. Shadow Madness it, unlucky.
Yeah. And then boom, Cabal Shadow Priest off the Disciple of Galakrond.
Like, no! I do like doing all this first, right? Because he can review the 2-drop, he can review the lackey, and he can still blackjack if he wants.
Yeah.
Or he could just...
He could just not now because of that poison minion. Yeah, it does make a world of difference to how competitive he is on board against 3/3 plus 1/4.
On the wheels of evil.
Dragon Maw most likely. Yep. Yeah, just gonna say no.
Yeah, I like it.
Have your minion.
Oof.
Well, that ended badly.
I wonder if you play... I'm just humming a lot. Do you ever just play Shield of Galakrond anyway?
I must consider.
Because Seiko has to be considering that he does need to get these invokes rolling, right? And if he uses Breath of the Infinite, then his follow-up feels weak. He does have the Grand Mummy, of course, but then his board is pretty weak, and he still hasn't invoked. So then he might have to invoke, or want to invoke next turn, but then is Bunnyhopper's board going to be strong again? Maybe this low power board from Bunnyhoppor is just as good a time as any to drop the shield. Yes, it's going to get farmed by the poison, but then the poison's gone. And the card is still on board.
Okay, so 2 counterpoints. Firstly, he doesn't have Galakrond in his hand right now, so I don't think there's any great hurry in getting on with the evokes. Second, even if he does do Breath into Grand Mummy, your opponent's expected turn is Shield of Galakrond itself, at which point you'd just be able to trade through that and drop the Shield of Galakrond plus Praise Galakrond on the following turn anyway. So I think the board clear is absolutely fine there. I don't really feel like Breath of the Infinite gets stronger in this matchup. And again, Seiko knows that Blackjack Stunner is still in hand, right? Waiting to come down and deal with stuff. So also, because you've narrowed down the secret that turn to exactly Dirty Tricks, based on Seiko's information, you also know that you're just dealing with that secret. So you're deactivating the Blackjack Stunner that your opponent has in hand as well.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it? I think it was a really tough turn. Because although you say Breath of the Infinite doesn't get better, I think it does. Because I think a lot of the time, we've seen a lot of rogues do the Kronk's buff, right? On a board of meh minions that Priest normally struggles to deal with in the late game. So I think Breath might actually get better. And even if this is bounced this turn, he can just replay it again next turn. It's kind of the benefit of the Blackjack nerf, right? For their opponents, is that it's often just replayable unless it's a 10-drop, of course. But now Breath's just better anyway, right? We can go for it now.
It's true. It's very true indeed.
And he got Fate Weaver for same damage.
He wanted to pull the Blackjack out of his opponent's hand and just catch that in the Breath of the Infinite as well. Pretty reasonable. He also generated himself a Fate Weaver, which has hit the Dragon Activator on his Breath of the Infinite, so he doesn't kill his own Evil Miscreant anymore. Top priesting. Well done.
I wonder.
You could also just play it first to have a 3-4 in play this turn. I like that less.
Yeah, he also doesn't get to... If he does that, he doesn't get to clear up the shot bot, does he?
Nope.
Which I think's unfun.
I must consider.
Or maybe Seiko is just full on not wanting to prot this quest and just not give Bunnyhoppor a card draw.
Sure.
We are all bound to fate.
That is very fair.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, so
he can
he's
do
going to do it
this
the 3-4
way.
way,
Okay,
and he's going to
sure,
drop
yeah.
drop the praise to be able to clear.
Yep, this makes sense. Well, Sandhoof Water Bearer is a bit of a pain as well. Not a bad minion to get off the invoke.
You have nightmares about this card, don't you? You mention it every time it comes up, as if it like just ends the game when it comes down. Oh, I figured it out. It's because you hate Res Priest. That's why.
Yep.
I've literally just figured it out.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I
You got
understand.
it.
I understand. Yeah. This flick is the juice, though.
Yeah.
Boom! That's killing 3 of those things because that one was generated, meaning there were still 2 more in the deck for Seiko that he now no longer has access to.
Ooh, okay.
Mummy needs
Silly,
5
not horrible. Did wonder whether he was just going to go all out and drop the Sethic as well, but it is quite susceptible to a lot of rogue removal,
Yeah.
especially because he can get through that Galakron, that Shield of Galakron already.
So many options.
Can we get a Bunnyhoppor Galakron check?
Just the one.
Oof. Pretty far away. How urgent do you think Bunnyhoppor wants to get this live? Do you think he's going to go for just Seal Fate on whatever this turn? just to at least get it to 2 to be able to break in case of emergency?
Yeah, certainly in this matchup, I think Galakron is the prime way to mana cheat because it's the one that can't be copied from your opponent. If you do it with Togwaggle, obviously your opponent has the ability to steal whatever treasure that you choose with their own Murazond, but because the Galakron mana cheat comes in the form of a battle cry, Murazond doesn't copy that, so you are able to get a one-sided advantage from it. Quite often I think the games I see Rogue win, it's fast Galakron, explode with Galakron. Rogue can't really counteract that very efficiently. Scramble, use up all of their removal, just fighting off your initial big push. And then in the later game, Togwaggle can come down for Crown and just make that like last huge board that Priest can't potentially deal with.
Shadow Step. And a Shield of Galakron. Seiko's just getting all the invokes off Bunnyhoppor.
Yeah, he's already at 4. And he
That's what I
has,
mean.
What, 3 more in his hand still?
Yeah. Oh.
I will act
Gonna
as
drop
your
it.
scapegoat.
Weirdly, I think he'd actually rather be hitting rogue invokes off these rogue Galakron cards right now. Like, I think just lackeys to tempo out and do things would be much more akin to what Seiko wants to do right now, as opposed to just having this full hand of absolute nonsense that he can't play.
I was just gonna say, he's gonna have to dump some things this turn, isn't he? Because of that.
Mummy needs
Yep.
5 more.
Oh, he got Circle. Okay, that's not so bad. That's a card that, at worst, you could throw away.
But at the same time, Seiko is not under pressure to really achieve anything this game. If he's this comfortable and Bunny is this slow in progressing himself towards a win condition of his own, Seiko can just chill. You are kind of the more reactive deck in this matchup as Priest.
There's always the consideration as well, is do you take a slightly worse Galakrond just to be able to do things with Krunks? But with Bunnyhoppor not having his own Shadow Steps right now, then even the Krunks things don't even really become that powerful, do they?
Prepping out the Seal Fate so Bunnyhoppor can actually start going fast and get the Togwaggle down this turn, and I think in this scenario, yeah, he's just going to have to suck it up and take the wand. I think it's fine here because Seiko just has all the resources in the world right now. Obviously, card draw is still more important for the Priest than just a bunch of randomly generated nonsense in their hand, because you get to those key cards, like your Apotheosis, like your Breath of the Infinite, like your Galakrond, like your Soul Mirror. But Seiko does already have the Soul Mirror in hand. I think Bunnyhoppor here recognizing that he just needs to pick the powerful one. He just needs to pick the powerful one and hope that there's no punish. Actually, he does kind of get away with it here.
Kind of.
But what did I say about how the Rogue Galakrond was the way that you could cheat mana that the Rogue couldn't steal from you? Imagine saying there was a thing you could do that the Priest couldn't steal from you, Raven. There's always a way.
And also, this helps with Seiko still having a ton of invokes left, because that Galakrond that gets stolen is actually still only at 2.
Correct.
Because you steal your opponent's Galakrond is where it's at, not where your invokes are at. So he does get to like re-invoke to a certain extent and get these cooking again.
Yeah, so now we are in this incredibly bizarre scenario where Seiko's Priest Galakrond has been invoked 7 times, and his Rogue Galakrond has been invoked 4 times. It's not super important because the takeaway from that is that they're now just both fully invoked, but as Raven correctly said, at the start when he stole that, it was only invoked 2. He just so happened to have the other 2 invokes that he needed to get the job done.
Seiko has 2 Galakronds fully invoked, Bunnyhoppor has 1 Galakrond only at 2.
Ooh, also fully invoked.
Oh yeah, now.
Yep.
There's the Quest Adventurer as well, but you can see pretty clearly, unless there's a Titanic Lackey, which is a great target to put on Quest Adventure, it does just die to the Soul Mirror.
Yep. Yeah, that was a huge wand from Bunny, honestly, just to be able to even have a hope of pushing a huge board out here. Does require the big answer from Seiko. This is the one thing, if you do wand, you want to put on as much pressure as you possibly can afterwards. So it means that if your opponent wants to Murazond you, you still have decent odds of being able to smash them in the face for 20 the next turn if they're not able to react to your board state.
Right.
But, as you mentioned, Soul Mirror is just there.
I also just wonder if Seiko can potentially go for just a Natalie Celine with the way the board's shaped up as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Because if he just kills this 8/8 with Celine, he can also, if he really wanted to, Shadow Madness a minion or play the Dragon Maw, then yeah. Or maybe now he can do even more because he's drawn Death.
Yeah. I was looking for like super scammy ways to just actually have a questing at the end of the turn.
Of course you were.
Yeah, because I'm a degenerate priest player, low key. But like you can like apotheosis the questing so it survives the Soul Mirror, then Shadow Madness something else to try and finish off the questing. But the problem is the taunt in the way right now kind of shuts all that down. Obviously, if you Soul Mirror first, then any cards you play afterwards are also then buffing your questing. But
if he'd actually had Fate Weavers left, he could do like what you said, the Apotheosis Mirror, and then just Death. But he just doesn't quite have the mana adding up. But still, it's going to be Soul Mirror, but as you can see there, just a very clean set of kills on Bunnyhoppor's minions. And most importantly, the Quest Adventure is dead, and the one effect has been used and negated.
Yeah, problem is now is that the hits keep on coming, and this is what you have to do as Rogue. Once you put your foot down on the pedal, you do not let go. You just have to keep loading up wave of threats after wave of threats, and that, as good as the wand was, the Galakrond has been much less impressive here for Bunnyhoppor.
I don't know, there is a Shadow Step there, there is the Kobold now for some extra damage.
It's
There's
just
a Zero Mana Secret to go with Hanar, but, well, Shadow Step with Krunks is a lot of pressure next turn.
That's true. That is true.
And that's a lot of stuff he can just kind of throw down, right? He's just seen Soul Mirror, he saw Breath of the Infinite earlier on. So maybe he does just set up for it here.
That is very fair, actually.
So it's the strike, extra damage.
It does make you wonder about that play on the previous turn, right? When you were talking about how you can just take care of the questing nice and simple. He even had, like, Death the questing, Natalie Celine, the Shield of Galakron. If you wanted to
once
do it
he drew
like
the death, it became
Yeah.
very easy to do, actually. You don't even really lose out after the death stroke.
Because, again, this is one of the strongest things about playing Priest, is that you just rip Breath of the Infinite off the top exactly when you need it. No, it's the amount of information that you can get about your opponent's expected plays, right? Because Seiko saw the Galakron, he took the Galakron, he saw that the Galakron was invoked to 2 when he took it. He then saw 2 invokes get played on the next turn, so he knows it's invoked to 4. So he knows if he uses up his like big removal turn there on that board, that there's just another one coming on the follow-up.
And there's still a second quest in, there's still the Van Cleef in the deck as well, right? So.
Right. Oh!
Oh,
Pack it up. And that is essentially a large number of the power plays made for Bunnyhoppor. This is where this build of Rogue does come into its own, though, because of those additional threats that Raven was mentioning. The Questing Adventurer and the Edwin Bank. Well, the Edwin's always there. The additional 2 Questing Adventurers, of which we've already seen one. Because against a lot of Rogue decks, you can get to this point and just be like, hey, you know what? I've killed all their stuff. Like, there's nothing left in their deck that I'm scared of. It's like random dragon lackeys now that are going to be able to punish me.
I just love the 10 armor gain because of the Murasant. Just 10 armor this turn. Like, what? Why is Seiko back up to 28? Oh, so insane. And Seiko has Krunks. He can just do the Krunks AoE buff and kill him.
He did also end this turn with 10 cards in his hand, and he has multiple 0 mana spells that he could have played.
Don't need any more.
Well... I'm not so sure about that one, Chief.
So now, do you think something has to look more like Krunks AoE and then Shadow Step Krunks into an 8/8 this turn from Bunnyhoppor?
You could go like Backstab, Kronk, Shadow Step the Kronks, Dirty Tricks, end with an Edwin Van Cleef kind of nonsense if you wanted to.
Okay. Most importantly, I think he has to actually clear this board.
Yes, certainly. Well, the Edwin's not happening if he's doing it this way. He does get the nice clear with the Betrayal usage.
He's going to go for the Shadow Step as well. Not going to be able to replay it this turn, of course. Maybe he's thinking of potentially Wax Dread into Krunks 8/8 next turn. Bunnyhoppor still needs to make a lot of threats left, because with Seiko having that huge armor gain as well, it means that he's relatively safe. It's hard to steal a game against someone on 28 health, right? If they were on 18, then yeah, if a couple of minions stick and you just grab some burst damage out of nowhere, you can get the job done.
Right. Yeah, he's winning on fatigue, he's winning on health totals. He is winning on total value in hand. They're both just Rogue Galakron.
Even on Waxadra.
His Kronks does both the forbidden play.
And now he gets another claw next turn.
Yep.
Madness. He has 2 Apotheosis in hand to push extra damage as well. Oof. All aboard the secret train. It would have to be quite the combo to deal with this board and bring Bunnyhoppor back into this game.
Problem is the
Okay.
blackjack stunners still have to happen though. So there's not a whole lot of mana to allocate for the remainder of these secrets. But Bunny does get to burn the Crocs here, which is huge. It doesn't actually sap it back to hand because there's no hand space, it just dies. So it's just the reanimated dragon to be dealt with later. Huge
Yeah, much more
difference.
clunky card to deal with, yeah, for to play, sorry, from Seiko.
So Snake Trap, Repentance, Dirty Tricks, Ice Barrier, and Eye for an Eye, which actually is really not that much disruption on Bunnyhopper's side.
Especially because he has minions he can really just throw away into these secrets to test them.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, he lost a 1-1, and then oh no, if he goes face and it's vape or whatever, he loses a 2-4. It's not like he's left anything on board that's a big punish if it gets dealt with. Seiko boosting his health even more, now getting access to another Shadow Step.
It's just rogue spells. It's still funny. After all this time, it still amuses me that you just start discovering rogue spells that are new.
I'm just waiting for the insane level play of Natalie Cillian Shadow Step. Just to eat as many minions as possible.
Right.
Okay, there's Questing, there's Van Cleef, there's Kronks, there's Waxadred, the Dream Team. Can it get the job done? I'm gonna say no.
How did Waxadred get on this team? Is he the intern at the Dream Team?
Yeah,
He doesn't,
he's the
seem
sub.
to be. He does seem to be part of the squad.
Yeah, he's the sub.
He's the water boy.
Yep. Real problem is, though, with such a big health difference and Bunnyhoppor going into fatigue. He's the one who has to pull something out of the bag here, and it's got to be something pretty impressive. Because all Seiko needs to do is just stay stable, and he'll be absolutely fine.
Darkness wanes.
Spellbender feels like it might offer some degree of protection here and let Bunnyhoppor stick a minion, but so many of these zero mana cards haven't been played yet that you feel like they have to be reactive things, right? So the opportunity that Seiko can just toss one of them away and then still have the given reaction he needs to the Waxadred, if he even needs to, because honestly I think there's a lot of positions where you can just ignore the 7-5 and kill the other stuff. It's coming back anyway. The difference is just whether or not it gets to attack next turn. And when you're at 48, I don't think whether it gets to attack or not is particularly important.
Right.
What about?
So the remaining secrets now are the Spellbender that was just played. There's still that Ice Barrier, and then the Repentance and the Eye for an Eye.
Yeah, honestly, he could use Shadow Word Death as a tester, and then still just have Time Rip for the Waxadred worst case scenario, right? Let's test it with Shadow Step instead.
Yoink!
Gonna steal even more of Bunnyhoppor's cards.
Time is running out.
Such a weird interaction. Yeah, that one Shadow Step just basically diffused this entire secret package. That did not go particularly well for Bunny. Seiko just going to assert
my
Waxadred dominance and move on with his life.
Out of cards.
Small smile there from Bunnyhoppor. He's like, okay.
Other cards for your life.
The real problem here, and I think we are getting to the point where it's just going to end the game, is that Bunnyhoppor will not really get the ability to attack with any of his minions. So although, again, okay, he's got Waxadred on board. He's cleaned up Psycho's Waxadred, right, but he won't get to attack. And then Psycho will probably just kill it next turn.
Yep.
It still won't get to attack. And at that point, Bunnyhoppor's just dead to fatigue before he can even stick a minion long enough for it to not have an impact here.
Exactly. And I'm fine with Seiko throwing his weapon into the 7-5. I wouldn't have liked to have seen him actually use a removal spell on it in that scenario because of the reasons I talked about. Like, it's just going to keep coming back anyway, you know? Just let it be there. It's fine. You can still beat it at this point. Just make sure all your premium removals are lined up to deal with these last couple of big threats that you need to deal with.
But I think with Celine, with Shadow Death for the questing, if he so chooses, then Bunnyhoppor's frankly just run out of things to actually even stop Seiko winning the game. Never mind winning the game for himself.
Right.
He just doesn't have the tools anymore. He could drop Apotheosis and just punch face with this 2-4 if he really wants.
He can do a lot of things, yeah. Because they just bump it in and penance. He can just, again, smack the Waxadread with his weapon and just push the damage face as is. They all win. It's just a matter of which one wins the most.
Yeah.
Yep, I think this is absolutely fine too.
Yeah, just let Bunnyhoppor deal with it.
Yep. Just let him have a Waxadread. He's going to have it anyway.
Ooh, clutch.
Wax, give me life.
I mean, Bunny's going big boy with his Kronks then?
Is nigh.
I guess it's just one final push, right?
One last attempt to try and stick a threat.
You can see though, time rip, double apotheosis, penance, whatever you want. It's all there. Death.
Shadow of Death.
Yeah, why not? With only 4 cards left for Seiko, I think Bunnyhoppor has to expect this to not stick, but it's still worth a try, right? In the odd outcome where the removals to the bottom couple of cards, maybe he gets to swing with it, but even then, very, very unlikely he can make up this level of damage.
Finally, the 0 mana Apotheosis comes down. Been waiting for it for so long. Game 2.
I'm a little bit surprised Bunnyhoppor's still in this game, as I want to go out on a limb and say this is literally unwinnable. There we go. And that's the concede. Seiko takes a win with his
Spell
priest.
Lackey Togwaggle scheme, maybe?
Nah. He'd
One
be dead,
less
right?
Yeah, I guess.
He'd be
But,
dead
like,
on the backswing.
maybe immediately off the rip if he'd have actually had the mana left to spend afterwards, if he'd have just hit it straight away off the hero power, but even then I don't think. But I mean, you know, it's a deck that randomly generates nonsense every turn. You might as well see what nonsense you generate at the end of the game, unless there's an out that you didn't think of.
Yeah, but Seiko did get a win with his priest, which means we are done with priest, at least for now. And he's still got a long way to go. Still got his quest warlock, and still got his demon hunter left up, right? I think it was. As Bunnyhoppor's... Yeah, that's right. The warrior was the band. So, yep, still got a lot to do there for Seiko. Bunnyhoppor, on the other hand, I don't think can be too upset with that game. One of the issues of just going a little bit slow against Priest is they do have a lot of that removal. We saw the Quest and Adventurers weren't really a threat against Seiko or against Priest because of all the layers of removal they have, whereas most decks don't have that hard removal for big targets right now. It pretty much is just only Priest.
Yeah, they also came down at a stage of the game where Priest was already winning board, which tends to happen when it gets to the later stages, is that, you know, Rogue loses the ability to play multiple threats a turn fairly quickly if they don't hit all the extremely powerful stuff very rapidly, or if their Wand and their Galakron aren't both the nuts. They really struggle to present wave after wave after wave after wave of threats, and that's really a lot of the theory behind that build of the deck in the first place, that having 2 questing adventurers allows you to keep on doing that.
Right.
It just so happened that the questing and the Edwin just came a little bit late for Bunny, to the point where, you know, Seiko A had a lot more time to be able to draw that key removal, and B was just already winning on board to the point where it was Bunny who was under pressure and having to do scrambly things as opposed to doing aggressive things, which he'd much rather be doing in the matchup.
Yep, it sounds like we are getting into our game number 3. It's going to be Rogue versus Quest Warlock here. Let's see how this one kicks out. I'm excited to see Quest Warlock. I feel like we actually didn't get to cast it much last weekend, which for me was a shame at least. So we'll get to see if it's going to do well versus this Rogue. But once again, I think it might suffer from the fact that it's got to deal with multiple Quest and Adventurers.
Yes. Very much agreed. We had a pretty middling showing, I think, from Quest Warlock overall in APAC. We saw some blowout wins, we saw some mirrors, but we also saw some druids beating up on them pretty rapidly and some giant Warmaul challengers just rushing them down. I think Rivius and, was it Possessi, just played the exact same game twice where it was Warmaul challenger into Inner Rage Rampage.
Yeah, it was insane, and it was just exactly the Moag into Dragon Breath. Just to be able to deal with it. It's pretty sick.
Dark Skies plus Plot Twist in the opening hand for Seiko. Those are, I would say, the two most important cards in the matchup. Even more so than Questing Explorer, which, you know, on the surface would feel like the #1 card that you would want to mulligan for. I think having Dark Skies in this matchup in particular eclipses that. And of course, Plot Twist is just the card that makes the deck work.
Yeah, and starting with it in hand means you can afford to play a little bit differently as well, right?
Yeah.
You can argue that, oh, well, you should just play what the best outs are anyway. And it's like, well, no, because if you know you can Plot Twist and on turn 4 with a life tap, you know that maybe, okay, this isn't so dangerous. The Plot Twist kind of heals you in a certain extent, so you can actually get away with tapping more. Whereas if you just don't have Plot Twist, you do have to commit to, say, for example, Dark Skies as some lighter removal, or to some taps and maybe playing some minions out and not getting the most out of that potential quest activation.
See, I thought when you started that explanation that you were talking about Dark Skies, because actually most of the things that you said are actually true about that card in this matchup and a lot of matchups as well. That just having it in your hand allows you to
That's
plan.
also true. That's also true.
Because planning for the long term with Dark Skies, I think, is one of the most satisfying things to do while playing this deck. Because if you don't have it in your hand and a sort of moderately threatening minion comes down, you have to think about Nether Breathing it. You have to sometimes even think about Soul Firing it. But as long as you can count the health on board and then expect and predict the play of your opponent on the next turn and, you know, cross-reference that with the size of your hand, you can often just sit there and life tap and say, you know what, yeah, I'll take 6, I'll take 8, just to be able to milk this Dark Skies a little bit more and be able to clear your board.
Point valid for both cards, I think. And I'm coming down now, though. It'll be a little bit awkward because, again, it's one of those weird cards where it is roundabout a threat because of the value it will generate, but also does Warlock care that much? It's not like you're playing a ton of minions to try and interact with the board. It's not like Seiko's trying to rush Bunnyhoppor down. Right. So I think he might actually be happy to say, okay, have you 1/4, spend all your mana on secrets every turn. I'm just going to live tap.
Yeah,
and then carrying on my game plan. So I think this is much less effective against a Quest Warlock than, say, a Demon Hunter, a Warrior, a Hunter. You know, anything that is board focused and wants to start being proactive on board.
Agreed. All this is really doing for right now is giving Seiko all the time he needed to go tap Plot Twist. Yeah. The problem might come if he saw a pink secret come down this turn, because then he might have to think about coining Plot Twist just to be playing around Counterspell. But in the current situation, yeah, he's just perfectly happy letting Bunnyhoppor just, you know, generate a bunch of garbage that he's really not that interested in.
I wonder if he has to seal Fate this turn.
His own face?
Yeah. Feels risky, but the problem is, what is he really going to Dagger Pass? Because he picked a Dirty Tricks, which isn't playable, right? So he can't even do more Hanar things. He's just going to go questing, okay. This does stop the Plot Twist turn. To a certain extent. Obviously, like, Seiko can go for Dark Skies coin Plot Twist if he wants.
Yeah. But I think he would just Dark Skies pass under most scenarios, or depending on these secret outcomes, because of course we know there's a redemption that's going to go off, and there it is. You can just Rain of Fire to clear this up as well.
Also really good, we don't really touch on it too much, but Abyssal Summoner, really good versus Rogue, honestly. Because it is not really susceptible to flick, which means that it's a huge threat a lot of the time if you can get it down on a empty-ish board. And even if it's stunnered, it's still kind of okay for the later game. You're still forced to stunner a secret out of them.
Yeah, sure. I would still much rather not get that card Blackjack stunnered if at all possible.
Oh, I agree, but it's literally the only thing Rogues really can do to it, right? The only thing. Because even if they flick it, they've used a flick, and then it's going to go down to, okay, it's 4-4 versus a 2-2 on the board, and you just play the next one, especially if obviously you have 2 in hand. Just going to go for Kelly then, though.
Yeah, his Abyssal Summoners were not really that impressively sized after he would have been coining one. Dealing with the 4-5. Pretty easy for Bunny to clear up and get marching again. Though with
Does
the
lowering the
Sealfate
size actually play around Stunner?
No.
Kind of.
Yeah, if you continue to not think about it.
Sealfate going to clean this up very nicely, though, and give Bunnyhoppor not only a target for that, but also an activation for his Miscreant, which looks pretty solid. Would he overdraw? Would he be at 10 with that, actually?
Sealfate Miscreant, he would have
He would have been at 9,
8,
right?
9, 10. No, he would have had 10, I think.
Okay.
So he played the Dirty Tricks that turn as well, that wouldn't have been played in the other world. So yeah, I think he would have ended up at 10 cards. But either way, he gets a Lackey in play here, which is actually really nice, because it's pretty often that the Quest Warlock does not really want to bother, unless they have exactly Mortal Coil, with contesting a 1-1 Lackey on board, or a couple of 1-1 Lackeys on board.
Yeah,
Bunny
I guess
is just going to get his free spell here.
a Netherwing would have been the most likely response. There isn't a coil there, right?
Ooh, we'll try again.
Oh, I thought he was going to Shadow Step it.
Much better.
Yep. Fair play. I would have Shadow Stepped that Bran and be like, look, in a few turns, you're going to get Dino Tamed. But Tyrion right now might be just a little bit better.
Does seem more solid, yes.
And just put the 1-1 into the Demon. Make this trade not really doable. Or at least even. Bunnyhoppor. I like it. Don't really see too much reason to Shadow Step it right now. It doesn't really achieve that much.
This plot twist has still not yet happened for Seiko.
It might not happen this turn.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we won't see it this turn.
Oh, he's going to tap.
He's going to tap. Okay, maybe we are seeing it this turn then.
Whoa. Yeah, okay. I was looking at just a straightforward Mortal Coil, poke the shield with the 2-2, kill the Tyrion, and then just play the other Abyssal. Throw up this board.
Here instead.
Okay, okay, yeah. This deals with it cleanly. It still allows him to plot twist. This is better in the long run.
Yeah, it's only a 7-card twist at 10 out of 20, though.
Almost out of time.
I think most of the useful cards were expended from his hand at that point. He had that one remaining Abyssal Summoner. So it's a pretty decent recycle. Seiko knows there's a lot more gas to come here. He just dealt with a Tyrion, which felt like a huge problem, but that really came out of nowhere, and the big issue is going to be this Wondrous one that's going to get cast in the next turn or two.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? He used a good chunk of resources dealing with the Tyrion, and that Tyrion was surplus, right? Like that was not an in-deck threat. That was just a complete, just bonus extra minion there for Bunnyhoppor.
Yep.
Oh, up to no good. Me too.
If Bunny could find any way of getting cards out of his hand, at least, we might be seeing this Wondrous Wand in the next couple of turns. Just keeps hitting value Lackey.
Oh!
Oh!
Is Bunnyhoppor just the best Witchy Lackey player we've ever seen?
Oh! That thing's got a 9-1 inside it, Raven.
He could go Craze Netherwing and then Rain of Fire. Doesn't look too bad. Still whipping a tap. Or honestly, going for a plot twist? Would you plot twist after that?
I think he's just drawn 18. Yeah, he's just drawn 18. So if he live taps, he completes quest next turn anyway. So I don't really see the point in the plot twist. Importantly, he completes quest off the natural draw next turn as well, so he can still start next turn.
Yeah,
with tap.
I was thinking more he has less cards to then chuck Malygos back in the deck and check that out, but it really is only Malygos that he's getting a true benefit from.
Okay. I think this is the reason to plot twist, is if you just want to tap this turn instead of reacting to the board.
Oh, Alex, Mally, Abyssal. All cards you would much rather. And Alex again.
No, and never! And then his
Sorry,
first
no.
draw is
Got
a
a Quest
freaking
Explorer.
river crop.
Oh, that's not what you're after, is it?
Is that just the nuts low plot twist?
I think that's probably the worst, yeah. You didn't even get any, you didn't even get any Aranasses, right? He didn't even heal. He just got Aranasses, then fine, at least he heals for a bit. Got nothing.
From nothing.
Bunnyhoppor is putting forward a pretty scary board. Seiko does have Twisting Nether though, so it's not the end of the world. It's just whether he can deal with the Death Rattle on the board next turn is going to be the scary thing for him. But this question is a huge threat, and you can see that Seiko, especially post Keladan, pretty much just needs to have Nether this turn, or he's going to die.
How many preps do you want in your hand, I guess is the question. Answer,
All
many.
of them.
Raven, a wise man once said something about head crack. Can you remember what it was?
I don't remember anything from a wise man saying anything about head crack. I do remember you mentioning that it always gets there, apparently.
Okay. Since
There
I
is
said
the
that,
twisting.
since I said that, don't you feel like we've seen a disproportionately high number of head cracks
Yes.
actually get taken?
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Even in like practice, it's just like, oh wait, head crack again. So here there is twisting, but there is nothing else afterwards. And
So many possibilities.
Just a 9-1!
it would put Seiko to 1 in which Rogue has a dagger. So although in any regular world, a Twisted Nether here would do great versus Rogue, the fact that this is exactly the Inquisitor means that he just can't. He just can't do it.
Of course it's the right way.
I mean, what's the line? What lives? You have to tap into Rain of Fire, second Craze, but then you're just doing 1,000,000 damage to yourself anyway? Okay, I guess that lives, technically?
Doesn't change anything though.
No, it doesn't.
It's like now if he nethers, sorry, if he craze nether wings, I mean,
There's
well,
still the
the
quest
taunt doesn't do enough, right? Because the question lives,
Yeah.
yeah. He's going to go for double taunt here, which does help, but there is a ton of cards, and I believe
There's just no way. I refuse
Yeah, I
to
believe
believe
with the-
he's not dead.
with the contract on as well, he was very, very dead indeed. With the contract being able to just kill off that demon. Anyway, Bunnyhoppor takes game number 3 with his Rogue over Quest Warlock. But you can see again, just yes, of course, Bunnyhoppor not only got sorry, it's my fault again. Not only got the I forgot about that. Not only got the Tyrion, but he also just got the Inquisitor as well, which is a huge issue because it just meant Twisted Nether was bad, right? In almost any other outcome, Twisted Nether, although still leaves him in a dicey spot, leaves him alive. But it just wasn't the case there. It's pretty crazy overall. But once again, we just see the power of Quest and Adventurer because it just put a stop to all the other ways he could have unlocked that turn, right? We said, okay, well, what about if he goes Netherwing and taps into Dark Skies or something to clear off the 9-1? Well, there's a massive Quest and Adventurer just sat on the other side of the board. So really just seeing those Quest and Adventures played in Rogue the last few weeks as I think really bumped up Rogue just as a deck in this meta up quite a lot.
Absolute amateur, Raven, honestly. I'll be putting into a complaint to my supervisor immediately. I cannot work with this level of slapdashery. Honestly, I expect better.
Okay.
from a
Well, we
seasoned
can ask some
pro
of
such as
we'll have
yourself.
to ask some of the casters to swap then, if that's the
Okay,
thing.
yeah,
I'll move
fair.
regions. That's fine.
Yeah.
But we do have more games coming up. Of course, Bunnyhoppor only got his warrior left to take a win with, and although of course he is favoured in the fact of being 2-1 up, most importantly, it's Pain Warrior, the high-end, just high-powered deck we've seen throughout the whole of this season of Grandmasters. By far the highest win rate, so it's looking truly scary for Seiko. We're past the point where the lineup looks favoured for Bunnyhoppor. Now he's just playing literally the best deck we have in this meta.
Yeah, and I'd say in the Warlock matchup against Quest Warlock, he's playing kind of the average build. Having Eggs and Terran helps a lot, but obviously the nuts is to have Wrench Caliber on top of all of that as well, and then they basically have no shot of getting through you unless they get the world's most timely ooze. But on top of that, he at least is running those eggs and so on, and he's not like the outright no death rattle version, which can be a little bit vulnerable to just straight up removal from Warlock and not being able to get there with the damage. Although Bunny's build, he's playing 1 Korkron and 2 Sky Raiders, which means maybe he's a little slim on the ground in terms of late game burst damage, but honestly the deck still has more than enough to get over the line in most scenarios. But that's not the matchup we're dealing with. The other matchup we're dealing with is the Demon Hunter, which I think is far less complex. This one comes down to he is playing Warrior. The deck plays Risky Skipper and Armor Smith. It's favoured against Demon Hunter. That's about as far as we need to go with the analysis on this matchup.
Yeah, and there's by no means to say that this is just an auto win, but it is a strong matchup against the Demon Hunter, because there are games where, guess what, I've played enough of them, where you don't draw Armor Smith, and then suddenly things get a lot trickier if you can't rely on that big Risky Skipper Armor Smith, get a ton of armor point in the game. If you are just relying on hero powers, or even sometimes a plain Armor Smith on a half built up board, then things do start to get a bit risky, because if there's something Demon Hunter can do, it's damage.
And this right here is the card, Frozen Shadow Weaver, particularly with Bunnyhoppor's curve, which is looking do nothing into Corsair Cash into weapon. Normally even that can just be good enough to pick apart your early boards to the point where just any and all mid-game tempo plays from the Warrior can just take over the game, sometimes even without an Armor Smith. If you can lock out weapons for 2 consecutive turns with Frozen Shadow Weaver to lock that up, that is a huge swing in terms of your pressure. 1 Frozen Shadow Weaver that comes down to respond to Corsair Cash on turn 2, that Frozen Shadow Weaver often connects for 8, even if it's just 1 of them. 1 attack it actually gets in, and then 1 swing from the opponent as they actually remove it with their weapon on the following turn. If you've got 2 of them, well, suddenly you're just pushing lethal. And I think in response to that threat, Bunny does have the diversion here of just saying, you know what, I can just get on board right now. I drew Rampage this turn. I don't really have to risk Frozen Shadow Weaver. I can just make my opponent Frozen Shadow Weaver my minion instead.
I got to see it come down there. Shadow Weaver going to go on the Warmold Challenger. It does give Bunnyhoppor some options. He still has Egg there. He could just go Corsair Cash now and just say, okay, I've seen a Shadow Weaver, the weapon gets a little bit safer. He could actually go Corsair Cash and still, in a rage, his Warmaul to say, okay, well, if you want to hit the Warmaul to reduce its health down, you lose your Shadow Weaver, and you can still draw a weapon for next turn anyway.
Right. I'm interested in getting this Egg developed when Terran is in hand. I think the way this curve is playing out, Corsair Cash is turn 5. You just play it when the weapon then gets played immediately afterwards, so you're not quite losing as much tempo. It's kind of a fallacy in a sense, because you still have to pay 2 for it whenever you have to pay for it, but at least it's then having an impact on the turn that you play it. So I like just playing out the curve with your minions, and then getting to the point where, you draw the weapon when you intend to use it immediately.
Here, though, there is the other Shadow Weaver, of course. There is along with that Hero Power and a Twin Slice now. So Seiko could actually Hero Power Twin Slice, kill off this Bomb Wrangler, and still Shadow Weaver, which seems pretty powerful to me.
Yeah, now there's just 2 bombs in play that can start making a mess, though, on the counter swing.
They can, yeah, with 6, but okay, kind of 4 health if you would count the 2 bombs damage. Then I think that's still a reasonable amount, especially with Warglaives as a follow-up here for Seiko.
Yeah, problem is, even if one minion bites the dust here, you're starting to feel a little bit short on pressure. And, you know, as long as the first bomb doesn't go face on explosion, killing one minion is a pretty likely outcome.
Could also go face and just Terran this turn, but again, off curve, not feeling too great.
Yeah. You just
Think if he
believe
could-
in the bombs.
Well, yeah, but I guess my overall point is, if he had just one extra mana, which is an easy thing to say, then I think, you know, if he could get something along down with this, maybe even a Lackey or a Pirate down with this and Terran, I think it would be pretty good. Because it's not like Demon Hunter's going to be able to play around Terran, especially post Shadow Weaver.
Double Frozen Shadow Weaver,
Yeah. So you are going to get the payoff, it's just if that's fast enough. And again, we do see one of those games where Bunnyhoppor has a lot of powerful things, but he doesn't have Armorsmith yet, he doesn't have Skipper yet. And it's another reason to potentially have played that Corsair Cache a little bit earlier, to see if he could just get that Anchor to guarantee that kind of wave clear, or you know, get him closer to it at least.
I was going to say, like, I think the way Bunny's played this curve, he really, really, really wanted to Rampage and Egg this turn, and then maybe Corsair Cache plus Terran on the following turn into the weapons. And really, Bunny just goes ahead and does it anyway. I think when he's going to the point where the Frozen Shadow Weavers are still available, he didn't really want to just drop Rampage and get it frozen again. But now the threat is the opposite. It's Warglaives of Azzinoth coming down on the other side. So if Warglaives is coming down, you want to preemptively Rampage your Warmaul Challenger. So it's much more difficult for your opponent to then clear up just using their face.
The good thing here, though, is Seiko, and Bunnyhoppor is aware of this, does have a second slice. So we can actually go Warglaives, second slice, hit in for 4, and still use these Shadow Weavers to push face. And I think... Ooh, okay, how's he going to do this? Is he going to kill off the Serpent, or is he just going to leave all this up again?
Time grows short.
Okay.
The way this ordering works suggests to me that bombs are dying this turn as well.
I think he's just trading going face, right?
Yeah, I'm just curious about why he was so deliberate with the attack first on the Frozen Shadow Weaver before he started swinging. Yeah, gonna clean up a bomb.
Great.
Oh!
Wow. Wow.
But he just has lethal in hand over a couple of turns.
Do you ever just go like Lance, swing, risky Skipper, go face with bomb?
You just get a 3-attack weapon and hit them with it, don't you?
I guess. It's no fun though. I wanted to explode the bombs for lethal.
Okay.
Trade! Ooh. This is very good though. Seiko taking a ton of damage with those Warglaives.
Poor Warlock.
That's not I-beam. That's not I-beam. That's not I-beam.
That's not I-beam. Join in. I felt left out for a second. Okay. That's going to be the concede there from Seiko. Just couldn't quite do it. And again, Seiko had to kind of ditch the aggressive plan to deal with the threat on board. And I wonder if there's something he could have done a little bit differently. But overall, Bunnyhoppor just going big with the Rampage. That Warmaul Challenger not getting dealt with early on, although it was frozen out, because it was never going away. It was always a threat, and it just had a little bit too much health to be cleaned up that little bit easier. If it just had one less health, it takes a whole less swing, and then suddenly things might look a little bit cleaner there for Seiko. But Bunnyhoppor did win the series, and honestly, like we said right at the start, just looking at the way the lineups just went against each other, it looked so Bunnyhoppor favored. I think it would have been incredibly, not only impressive, but just crazy if Seiko would have won that.
Yeah, so 2 things. I think Seiko has options, which you always do as Demon Hunter against Warrior, when Warmaul Challenger comes down, to just throw some damage into it, even though it felt bad. It seems really stupid in that scenario because you're freezing it and then also throwing damage into it. So,
Right.
I would have had an extremely hard time convincing myself that that was the play. Secondly, there was an extremely good reason. why none of those cards were I-Beam at the end of the game is because Seiko is not playing any I-Beams in his Demon Hunter deck, which means certainly the play was Corsair Cash and hit your opponent in the face with a 3 attack weapon. If it was a 2 I-Beam list, maybe then we can talk about playing Livewire Lance and looking for a lackey to impact the board and maybe taking a lethal out that turn with the bomb trading, but there's no way Bunny was dead that turn, not even to Skull of Gul'dan plus runner. There's no way that Seiko could play around 6 damage over 2 turns from the Corsair cached weapon. So that, I believe, was just 100% out from Bunny in that scenario.
Yeah, just very well executed overall. But again, congratulations to Bunnyhoppor. He does move on to the winner bracket or upper bracket of his group, and Seiko's going to go down into the lower bracket. But that was just match 1 for today. We are going to go to a break while we set up our match number 2. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with some more Hearthstone.